Okay, we're live. All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the YouTube channel Geopolitics. Well, the YouTube channel, the Black Brain Trust. We're talking about Geopolitics Wednesday today. We have our co-host Mike. This is Lionel, and we have a special co-host Yada. How you doing today, Yada? How you doing today, Mike?
I'm
Good.
doing well.
All right. Just like Monday, for a short while, Yada will be our special guest. She'll be reading the topics today. So, with that said, you can take over from here, Yada.
Okay, the first video is how the drone attack on Maduro unfolded in Venezuela.
Okay, yeah. In this video, the drone attack, Maduro was at I forgot what public command he was at, but there were two drones. This straight from the video. There were two drones that flew over close to him. They had explosives on it. One drone, I guess, went off course, but the other drone exploded a few blocks away from him. And about midway through the video, you can see everybody going up. And remember, all the links will be down in the description for you can follow along with us. But if you look at the video, you hear this big explosion, like boom. I think they were using C4, the plastic, the plastic dynamite. They attached it onto the drones, and there were some people that were living in the building that the other drone ran into and exploded. And the people were saying that it felt like the building shook. So just to give an example how much power these bombs had. And I think last week we were talking how Maduro said that there was a failed assassination attempt on his life. Assassination attempt on his life. And this is the footage. This is the footage following up to what he was saying. Yeah. You got anything to say about that, Mike?
Yeah. So this isn't the first time that they've made an attack on Maduro's life. About a few months ago, they used um, some um, some soldiers went rogue and took a actual military helicopter and tried to fire at the Capitol building where his staff was. So that helicopter was actually brought down, and they captured those rogue assassins and actually executed those men. So there's been multiple attempts against Maduro just the last year or so under the Trump administration. Um, these drones that they used were actually toy drones. Well, I shouldn't say toy, but they're consumer-based drones. These drones, I think they were like DJI or some Chinese manufactured drone that can be purchased at Best Buy or any one of these local stores near you. And they figured out a way to attach an explosive device. So there are ways to create explosive devices light enough so that the drone can pick up and carry. Um, Typically, if you put too much weight on a drone, then it can't really get up too high um, because it'll start to drain the battery because you need a lot of lift capabilities, and the drones are not really designed for that. But if you design it correctly, um, then it actually works. Now, Maduro is actually blaming the state of Colombia, which is next door to him, a country next door to him. I know if you could pull up a map, you can kind of show the proximity of Colombia, Venezuela, Brazil. Um, what happens is Colombia has access to Venezuela's border, so it makes it easy for them to penetrate into there. We know that the United States government has been working diligently with Colombia to actually launch small attacks against the country. A few months ago, at the beginning of our Black Brain Trust geopolitics hangouts, we discussed that Colombia is going to be a member of NATO. And Article 5 inside NATO stipulates that if a one member country is attacked, then all member countries must come to the rescue of that one country. So I think what's happening now is that Colombia is trying to provoke the state of Venezuela to actually respond to an attack, and then what would happen is Venezuela will get itself into a ground war with Colombia.
Okay. So moving on to the next article. Rockets strike Afghan capital in latest
Um,
oh,
I apologize. I I apologize, Yada. I want to get back to the Colombia thing. I brought up a map of Colombia, and on the top eastern, not eastern, top west corner of South America.
Yada, you have to stop sharing your screen because
Okay, okay, cool. Yeah, the top west corner of South America. You see Colombia here with my cursor is going around that, but then you see Venezuela to the right of it, to the east of it. So Caracas is the capital of Venezuela. Bogota is the capital of Colombia. So yeah, they're right next door. Like we Mike just said, Colombia is member of NATO, so they're right next door. And Colombia going to war with having any type of skirmish with Venezuela is going to be, we imagine, a proxy, some type of proxy war by NATO to go into Venezuela and take control of the country, and thereby, once they take control of Venezuela, they can take control over the oil deposits. Because, like you said before, previous times, Venezuela's oil deposits, oil reserves, they have a significant percentage of the world oil reserves in Venezuela,
the most.
the most. All right, I stand corrected, the most. All right, Yada, you go ahead.
okay. Okay. Okay, the next article is Rockets strike Afghan capital in latest spike of violence. Kabul, Afghanistan. Rockets slammed into the heart of the capital of Kabul on Tuesday as President Ashraf Ghani delivered a speech marking a Muslim holiday, the latest in a series of brazen attacks that highlighted Afghanistan's deteriorating security. No industries were reported from the mortar rounds that hit in the diplomatic quarter. One struck near the presidential palace, another near a NATO compound in the U.S. Embassy, according to police official Jan Aga. In response, Afghan helicopter gunships bombed the house from which the rockets were believed to have been launched. Hours later, at least two militants were reported killed. The booms of the mortar rounds echoed through the live broadcast of Ghani's speech commemorating the Eid al-Adha holiday, and the president interrupted his remarks to say, if they are thinking the rocket attack will keep Afghans down, they are wrong. The attack came amid an unrelenting wave of deadly violence across the country in recent weeks and dealt another blow to Ghani's effort to receive peace talks to end the 17-year war. On Sunday, he had offered a holiday ceasefire, saying it would only take effect if the Taliban reciprocated. An affiliate of the Islamic State group claimed responsibility, saying its fighters had fired the shells that struck the heavily fortified Kabul neighborhood. There was no immediate comment from the Taliban. The Interior Ministry launched an investigation into the security breach. Former Interior Minister Nurul Haq Alumi blamed political squabbling inside Ghani's government for distracting the president's attention from security matters, allowing the near daily violence by insurgents to continue. The death every day of our security forces is a big calamity for our country, said Alami, now a defense analyst. He also blamed neighboring Pakistan, saying that the international community has done too little to force Islamabad to shut down safe havens for terrorist groups inside its country. The U.S. and Afghanistan also have routinely alleged that Pakistan harbors Taliban insurgents. Pakistan denies the allegation and says none of the deadliest terrorist attacks on its territory have been plotted by the Islamic State affiliate based in Nangarhar province in eastern Afghanistan. Afghan security forces, aided by U.S. air support, have repeatedly struck IS redoubts in Nangarhar in recent months with some success, although the group still has been able to carry out attacks. Last week, it claimed responsibility for a suicide bombing that killed 34 high school graduates, most of them Shiites, who were taking university entrance exams in Kabul. The IS affiliate is known as the Islamic State in Khorasan province, the ancient name of an area that once spanned parts of Iran, Afghanistan, and Central Asia. In Islamabad, new Prime Minister Imran Khan condemned the rocket attack. We are with the Afghan people and government to fully defeat this cowardly thinking, Khan said in an Urdu language statement. The Kabul neighborhood where the mortar rounds hit is one of the most secure in the capital, where embassies and government buildings are surrounded by concrete blast walls and coils of razor wire. Many streets near the U.S. Embassy are closed off, along with those near sensitive government and military installations. It is clear that those that carried out the attack are enemies of Afghanistan, enemies of Islam, and enemies of peace, said Lieutenant Colonel Martin O'Donnell, a spokesman for U.S. forces in Afghanistan. Police had noticed a suspicious vehicle and followed it to a mud brick house near the sprawling Eid Mosque, where hundreds were praying during the Eid al-Adha holiday. Police spokesman Hashmat Stanatsky he told the Associated Press, I'm sorry, he told the Associated Press that the militants were believed to have fired the rockets from the house. A helicopter gunship bombed the location, destroying the house and the vehicle. After the explosions, witnesses reported sporadic shooting could be heard from the area, though it wasn't clear who was firing. The witnesses spoke on condition of anonymity, fearing for their safety. O'Donnell said four attackers were killed and five surrendered, but Interior Ministry spokesman Nihab Danish said two attackers were killed. Danish, Danish initially said that two Afghan security forces were wounded in the subsequent firefight, but later revised the number to six, including some civilians. The gun battle also ignited a fire that burned down a nearby market. The UN Special Representative to Afghanistan, Hamichi Yamato, pleaded for peace on the Muslim holiday to allow all Afghans to commemorate this auspicious celebration. I strongly urge the parties to the conflict to demonstrate goodwill, to respect this time of joy and tolerance, and to refrain from resorting to violence, he said. On Monday, the Taliban ambushed a convoy of buses and abducted scores of people, including women and children. Afghan forces rescued nearly 150 of them. Nearly this month, the insurgents launched a coordinated attack on Ghazni, a strategic provincial capital only 120 kilometers (75 miles) from Kabul. It took Afghan forces aided by U.S. airstrikes and advisors more than 5 days to drive them out in a battle that killed at least 100 security forces and 35 civilians, while about 200 militants were killed. Both the Taliban and the Islamic State group are fighting to overthrow the US backed government and impose a strict form of Islamic rule, but they are fiercely divided on leadership, tactics, and ideology and routinely clash with one another. The US and NATO officially ended their combat mission at the end of 2014, but have repeatedly come to the aid of Afghan forces in recent years to prevent the Taliban from advancing into major cities. The U.S. has long insisted on an Afghan led peace process between the government and the Taliban, but has recently indicated it will be open to direct talks with the insurgents. The Taliban have sent delegations to Uzbekistan and Indonesia in recent weeks. On Tuesday, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said the Taliban have accepted an invitation to attend talks on Afghanistan in Moscow on September 4th. All this has raised the Taliban's diplomatic profile by carrying out the deadly attacks. The Taliban say they met with the U.S. diplomat in Qatar this month for what the group described as preliminary talks and said it expected further negotiations.
Thank you for reading that, Yada. Um, the problem is that the Taliban have 48% control over the country. So at this point, if they have this much control over the country, you have to come to a negotiation. And the problem is the stumbling block is the United States is in the way. They have support from Pakistan, which is why Pakistan is not cooperating with the United States and basically saying we don't have anything to do with this. They're not attacking us, so why ask us for our help? On something that we don't have anything to do with. And we know that they get a lot of support from Iran. Quiet as kept, and they have great support within Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and the rest of the Caucasus states, especially places like, especially with Moscow. Moscow is, there's a meeting coming up on next week on the 4th to actually have peace talks, delegation talks. So the only oddball here is the United States and NATO. And if United States and NATO, as long as the United States and NATO is there, then they're the actual they're the actual troublemakers here. They're the ones who are delaying peace talks and being strenuous on dialogue, because there's a certain sort of resource that's in the ground that the United States wants control over, and that's called lithium.
All right, yeah, and that goes to show a lot of these things, a lot of these wars, a lot of these conflicts are over resources. Obviously, greed and resources. I would put greed in there also. Instead of saying, "Hey, Afghanistan, we are a powerful country, we are the world reserve country," so forth and so forth and so forth. Um, we want to mine your lithium, and if you let us do that, we'll give you a cut. Instead of doing that, greed sets in and they say, well, no, we want everything for ourselves. We want everything for our investors. We want everything for the companies. That's only people we want to split everything with, and we'll use real human soldiers to go in and fight the war, cripple the government, drive a wedge between the Islamic states, and just to get this natural resource. So it's blood everywhere. It's gonna be blood everywhere. Obviously, with this going on, there's no good thing that's going to come out of this. A lot of people are going to die.
Is that it? Are we moving on to the next article?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Iran unveils new domestic fighter jets. Iran unveiled a new domestic fighter jet, with President Hassan Rouhani saying Tehran's military strength was only designed to deter enemies and aimed at creating lasting peace. Images broadcast on state television on Tuesday show Rouhani sitting in the cockpit of the new Kausar fourth generation fighter at the National Defense Industry exhibition in Tehran. State media said it had advanced avionics, and multi-purpose radar, and it was 100% indigenously made for the first time. Footage of the Kawsar test flights was circulated by various official media. The live footage of the plane taxiing along a runway at the defense show was cut before it took off. When I speak of our readiness to defend, it means we seek lasting peace. If we lack readiness, we welcome war, Rouhani said in a televised speech shortly after. Some think when we increase our military power, this means we seek war, but this is peace seeking because we don't want war to happen, he added. If we don't have a deterrent, it gives a green light for others to enter this country. We have learned. Defense Minister Amir Hatami said the aircraft program was motivated by memories of airstrikes in Iran suffered during its 8-year war with Iraq in the 1980s, and by repeated threats from Israel and the United States that all options are on the table in dealing with Iran. We have learned in the Iraq war that we cannot rely on anyone but ourselves. Our resources are limited, and we are committed to establishing security at a minimum cost, he said in a televised interview. The U.S. has sold hundreds of billions of dollars of weapons to the Iran's regional rivals, but has demanded that the Tehran curb its defense programs and is in the process of reimposing crippling sanctions in a bid to force its capitulation. Rouhani said Iran must show restraint as well as deterrence in an apparent swipe at his hardline opponents who seek to provoke the U.S. with aggressive slogans. With a couple of sentences, one can start a fight. With a couple of military moves, one can enter a confrontation. But then it will be costly, he said. The skill is to protect the country with minimum cost. Following the withdrawal of the United States from the 2015 nuclear deal in May, Iran has avoided an aggressive response and sought to maintain its good will with other international partners who oppose Washington's move. Rouhani said U.S. pressure was also a spur to action. Why does America impose economic sanctions on us? Why does it impose them on Turkey? Why does it drag China into an economic war? Because it feels each one of them has a weak point. We must fix our weak points.
Thank you for reading that, Yada. This indigenous plane, I believe when the United States was there in 1979, just before the revolution, they brought in a lot of great hardware. I think like F4s, F5 Phantoms. They had F14 Tomcats as well. Um, Quite a few devices that, quite a few pieces of military equipment that they brought in that was still preserved once the United States left in '79. So they got a lot of late hardware, or I shouldn't say late, but third generation and fourth generation based like that was left behind by the United States. And I think what you're seeing in the picture is this: the Iranians actually refurbishing a lot of this old hardware because they never had to use them um, until the Iraq-Iran war. However, they most of that hardware was tucked away inside mountains, so that they didn't have to worry too much about them being taken out. Um, but they're still, they're still very useful. If you look at Syria, Syria still uses MiG 23, Sukhoi 22 fighter jets, and T-55 battle tanks. Those are pieces of equipment, military equipment that was used during, 50 years ago, for that matter. Those are 50-year-old pieces of hardware used in the battlefield, still being used this very day against ISIS. So it, it's um it's likely that they're going to repurpose all this hardware that they have and basically claim that it's indigenous. Even though it's not really isn't. Even though it's not really, it's actually just chassis being redone over for modern day times. And I think the article mentioned that it has fourth generation hardware in it, which is pretty good for something that's about 35 to 40 years old. The latest generation on the market right now for fighter planes is actually fifth generation, so they're one step behind what the United States has.
All right. I have no comment. I will be back later. I'll be back in a bit.
Okay. The next article is military likely training for strikes on U.S. Pentagon. The Pentagon claims has The Pentagon claims China has expanded its bomber operations and is likely training for strikes against the United States. A Pentagon report released on Thursday said Chinese bombers are developing capabilities to hit targets as far from China as possible. Over the last 3 years, the PLA, People's Liberation Army, has rapidly expanded its overwater bomber operating areas, gaining experience in critical maritime regions and likely training for strikes against U.S. and allied targets, the report said. The Pentagon report added that China's space program was progressing as well. The PLA continues to strengthen its military space capabilities despite its public stance against the militarization of space, it said. The report, which comes amid heightened U.S. China tensions over trade, claimed that China is seeking to rapidly increase its global influence, with defense spending that the Pentagon estimates exceeded $190 billion in 2017. A U.S. based political analyst in California says Americans believe their so called international order is being challenged by Russia and China. In January, the U.S. military put China and Russia at the heart of a new national defense strategy, saying great power competition, not terrorism, was the primary focus of the U.S. national security. This month, the Trump administration announced an ambitious plan to usher in a new Space Force as the sixth branch of the U.S. military by 2020. The U.S. argues its rivals like China appear increasingly ready to strike America's space-based capabilities in the event of a conflict.
Thank you for reading that, Yada. It's funny. I'm looking at the comments under that video, and under that article, and it's some interesting comments. But yeah, the United States is pretty frightened by the idea that anybody can challenge their hegemony throughout the world, and what you're starting to see now is the formation of Chinese military taking the lead on standing up to aggression. Russia has been doing this since the collapse of the Soviet Union. Even prior to that, during the Soviet Union, they've been standing up to the hegemony of the United States. And now that the walls are starting to cave in, you're starting to see the United States kind of backpedal and say, "Hey, what are these guys doing?" Um, there's a sort of international order. Well, that international order is actually white supremacy, and that's starting to be challenged now. You have non-English speaking nations that can actually defend themselves, such as Russia, such as China, such as Iran, such as Turkey, you know, um, as well as some of these African states too, such as Egypt, such as South Africa, that is not playing, playing to the tune of the United States anymore. And China is basically leading the way on in terms of technology and in terms of the transportation of goods and manufacturing. So they're a rival that should be a force to be reckoned with. I think Lionel steps away, so we'll move on to the next article.
Okay, next article Taiwan. Oh, sorry, sharing screen. Okay, Taiwan says China out of control as it loses El Salvador to Beijing. Taiwan vowed on Tuesday to fight China's increasingly out of control behavior after Taipei lost another ally to Beijing, when El Salvador became the third country to switch allegiances to China this year. Taiwan now has formal relations with only 17 countries worldwide, many of them small, less developed nations in Central America and the Pacific, including Belize and Nauru. Speaking in Taipei, President Tsai Ing-wen said Taiwan would not bow to pressure, describing El Salvador's decision as further evidence of China's efforts to squeeze the island, which have included regular Chinese bombers patrols around Taiwan. We will turn to countries with similar values to fight together against China's increasingly out of control international behavior, Tsai said. Taiwan Foreign Minister Joseph Wu told reporters earlier that Taipei was not willing to engage in money competition with its giant neighbor. He said El Salvador had been continuously asking for massive funding support since last year for port development, but Taiwan was unable to assist with the unsuitable project after assessment. Pressure from China will only make Taiwan more determined to continue our path of democracy and freedom, he said. China's rude and unreasonable behavior will certainly have negative impact to cross-strait relations. This is also not how a responsible country should behave. Beijing considers Taiwan to be a wayward province of one China, ineligible for state-to-state relations, and has never renounced the use of force to bring the island under its control. In Beijing, the Chinese government's top diplomat, State Councilor Wang Yi, said El Salvador had made the right decision. I'm confident that the people of El Salvador will feel the warmth and friendship of the Chinese people and derive tangible benefits from its cooperation with China, Wang told reporters alongside his El Salvador counterpart, Carlos Castaneda, shortly after the pair signed an agreement establishing ties. Extraordinary opportunities. El Salvador's president, Salvador Sanchez Cerén, announced in a nationally televised speech that his government had broken off diplomatic relations with Taiwan and instead established ties with China. Sanchez Cerén said the Central American country, which built ties with the Republic of China government in 1933, will see great benefits and extraordinary opportunities in the new relationship with Beijing. Taiwan's formal name is the Republic of China, whose government fled to Taiwan in 1949 after losing a civil war with the communists. We are convinced this is a step in the right direction that corresponds to the principle of international law and regrettable trends of our time, Sanchez said. In Beijing, Castaneda said it was a
That's
learn its
fine.
friends of luring its friends away with offers of
That's fine, Yada. You can stop reading. But thank you for reading that.
you said stop reading?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Um, so what's happening here is that China China has reasserted itself for what it's worth on the global stage. Taiwan is actually a part of China. What the United States tries to do is to placate this idea that, oh well, Taiwan is a separate country from the mainland, and it really is not. It's actually direct a direct extension of the mainland itself. So the idea that Taiwan can operate independently of China is not really so. Um, and the country El Salvador dropping relations with Taiwan to build relations with China has a few areas of concern here, right? So Taiwan isn't able to lend the money for funds to actually build a port and actually or lend the resources to actually build a port inside El Salvador. And the reality is they can't really do anything for El Salvador. So why should they keep ties with them when they can get extra external support from China? It makes sense at the end of the day that China has the resources available to fulfill a commitment to Atlantic American country like El Salvador. Now there are other countries that are around that have actually dropped support too. A few countries in I'm sorry about that. There's a few countries in Africa. I think there's only about 17 countries left around the world that actually do recognizes Taiwan to do business with directly, and slowly but surely those countries are actually turning over. El Salvador is actually the latest this week to actually turn coat on Taiwan. Um, we saw the article earlier with the Chinese actually being the Americans being suspicious of the Chinese actually threatening to bomb, or attack U.S. military assets or even U.S. assets in the region of South China Sea or China or the mainland body, outside the mainland body, such as Okinawa and Japan. Uh, Taiwan is very close to this area in a great proximity for China to actually take control over it. And I think what's happening now is China is ramping up its military for an invasion of Taiwan. As it stands right now, this week, this month, I don't think China has the capabilities to take Taiwan back, but give China about 6 months, maybe 9 months into 2019, summer of 2019, they'll be fully capable and ready to actually take control back over Taiwan, and you'll probably see most of these other countries that are left, except for the United States, actually drop support for Taiwan, and Taiwan go back to the mainland as a part of the one China strategy. What's going on, Jack Charles? How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, brother. I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing well, sir. Thank you.
Awesome. Great read, Riyada. A question I have for that is, what is the best strategy right now for Taiwan? Like, what's the best thing for them to do now, seeing that El Salvador left them? Like, what's their next best move?
Well, they're losing support around the world. So every month for the last maybe 5 years, or maybe the last 2 years, one country has dropped support for doing business with Taiwan in exchange for China. Taiwan doesn't really have a whole lot to offer. They are a intellectual hub, so to speak, because they have to manufacture goods and develop goods for trade in order to survive. However, Taiwan is a part of China, and they cannot break that relationship. So what's going to happen now is either Taiwan recognizes China as its parent state, or China will react and go in and take control, assert control over Taiwan, which can open up a whole box of a can of worms that can't be put back into the can itself, because United States does extensive business with Taiwan because it tries to rattle the cage of China, and China's only going to take so much of that.
So right now, there's nothing Taiwan can do except for get with the program, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much. It'll be similar to like to Puerto Rico trying to break ties with the United States to go do business with Venezuela. That's not going to happen. The United States will never tolerate that.
Interesting.
Hello?
Yes, Yada.
I'm sorry about that. My Wi-Fi is acting up today. Are we still continuing with the next video?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. Here we have a video about Russia unveiling a new artificial intelligence guided long-range bomber. It's called Tu-22 MPM.
I'll take it from you, Yada. So Russia has been working on this new strategic long-range bomber that it's actually stealth. So it's actually hard to pick up on radar, but the main avionics of it is actually artificial intelligence, so it can actually guide itself around unmanned. Jack, if you can actually mute yourself.
All right.
What this strategic bomber has is the capabilities of delivering nuclear payloads or nuclear strike capabilities on anywhere around the world against any adversary or any would-be party involved in the harassment and antagonization of the Russian state.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Yada. In the United States has something similar with the F-35 fighter, the F-35 multi-purpose fighter jet, right? And they also have the B-2 bomber, somewhat similar, but not exactly fifth generation, sixth generation, like this new strategic bomber that the Russians have come up with, and they're probably the first ones on the market to actually get something like this off the ground with artificial intelligence. I know you can probably pull out the electronics or the avionics on the F-35 and modify it again, but that takes a lot of work, and the F-35 costs a lot of money to actually to actually modify for what it is right now. It costs a lot of money just to develop. I can't imagine retrofitting it with some other new electronics, unless there's maybe a software upgrade. I can understand that, but not actual hardware. Taking 100 F-35 fighter jets that they've developed, and trying to retrofit it with some new artificial intelligence on its extra next generation technology is kind of pointless at this point, so to speak. Jack, did you have anything you want to add?
Well, this aircraft now, I guess somebody's right in the back door, like the United States. What did it have to? What did it have to counter strike that? What can they do to protect themselves from something like this? What do you think?
What I think is that the F-35 is probably the fastest device that they have, or the fastest piece of hardware that they have to actually chase something like this down. But you would have to use your satellite technology to actually visualize where this plane is and where it took off from, and actually intercept it before it even gets into your airspace. And in this regard, this is why the United States has so many military bases, so many installations around the world, so that they can actually stop something like this from happening. But as time progresses, the United States' capabilities are actually being challenged by other nations who have restored their military apparatus, so to speak, as an answer to the American standards of military hardware. It's not like it's a bad thing that the Russians have this. The Russians have this because there are a lot of Americans have a lot of technology that they can use to take down Russia if they wanted to. And the thing is, that's what drives Russia's industry. So there is a necessity to have a long-range artificial intelligence-driven bomber, to protect itself from any sort of adversary, especially the United States.
Now I have a question. We went over previous times of Russia's new military arsenal. A few things we went over. One of the first things we went over was its new tanks. Then we went over countries buying this S-400s, and we understand that they will be developing S-500s soon. They're working on that. Also, we went over the Mach 2 or Mach 1 rockets, not rockets, but
Missiles.
yeah, missiles. Now you have these planes that can be unmanned, autonomous planes driven by artificial intelligence. I read, I think I read or looked at an article where it was saying they're developing their military for to reach mutual respect. I forgot the term that was used. Mainly, it was for, okay, Russia has this military might. If we attack, it's a zero sum game because we'll get messed up in the process. So it's better to just respect what they have and keep doing. I understand they are building up their military to reach this feat. Now with these rockets that Yada's just went over on the dock, you and Yada and Jack went on the docking. I'm imagining these jets fitted with these Mach 1 missiles, and they're going around in a scenario where it's a war, and they're going around and they have these things autonomously driven, which means I'm not going to say that they can go on kamikaze missions, but the scope in which their military is strengthened to is amazing to me.
Yeah, they have a military-industrial complex just like we do. So there's always an urgency to constantly build hardware. So there are multiple missiles that Russia has developed that are nuclear capable. The original missiles that they've created that you may have heard of is a Scud missile, right? It's called an OTR-21. Um, most countries that dealt with the Soviet Union at the time had all those missiles, including Saddam Hussein in Iraq. And you can put all types of weapons of mass destruction on top of these surface-to-air missiles or surface-to-surface missiles. But these new missiles that Russia has been developing, and they've used them in Syria against these terrorists, the last year or so. Most of them are actually nuclear capable. So they have something called a Russian Bear. I think it's called like a Tu-92 or Tu-22 or something to that effect. I forget the exact model name for it, but it's an old Cold War based plane. This new plane is actually going to replace it. You might have seen it. It's a propeller-based plane that they've used probably since the 1950s. It's a very old plane, but it's still effective, and they just retrofitted it with high next generation electronics. So there's some artificial intelligence inside these planes too, even though the plane is about 80 years old or something like that, like 60 years old. So Russia has been very good at salvaging its resources and making it better for for practical use in modern warfare. But even that plane could actually be shot down really fast because it's really slow. So this new supersonic plane is actually there to replace it.
So this is it's just a matter of them just showing they just want to display their strength right now. That's their goal pretty much to show the world like, okay, we have the capabilities. We stand right next to the United States. We're not behind. We're leading. So that's pretty much what they're trying to do, correct?
That's absolutely correct. And if you're Russia, and if you're the president of Russia like Putin is, it's incumbent upon you, and actually a high priority, to demonstrate that you have the capability to secure the longevity of your nation state, because Russia has NATO on its borders. We read an article last week with Lionel that well, maybe a couple weeks ago, that a NATO exercise mission that happened, I think in Estonia, they actually according to the article, they accidentally fired a missile into into the Russian border. That's very dangerous stuff. If you're talking military exercises, that's dangerous, because what could happen is it could be a pedestrian walking or something to that effect, and somebody can end up getting shot with an AK-47 bullet, or they can get hit with a missile while they're driving, on a family vacation, and now you have World War III. And I don't think anybody wants to go to war with Russia with the 2,000 nuclear missiles that they have armed, and plus all the submarines that they have that can't even be detected on radar, on sonar, I should say, that are super fast, super quiet than any other submarine that's on the market, including the United States. Yeah, we can go to the next article.
Okay. Blackwater founder hopes Bolton embraces plan for privatizing Afghan war. Founder of the war contractor formerly known as Blackwater, Eric Prince, during an interview said he hopes White House National Security Advisor John Bolton will be open to considering his plan for privatizing the war in Afghanistan. Over the weekend, Bolton told ABC News that he was willing to mold new ideas on the war in Afghanistan, including replacing U.S. forces with private military contractors. With John Bolton there now, I don't know what he's vested in a very conventional Pentagon approach, Prince told The Hill on Monday. Maybe he's willing to explore options for a solution in Afghanistan. In an interview with NBC News last week, Prince said his proposal would reduce U.S. troop levels in Afghanistan from 45,000 to 8,000. The current footprint of 15,000 regular U.S. troops and 30,000 contractors will be replaced by 2,000 Special Forces personnel and 6,000 contractors. Prince said his plan would represent a substantial cost reduction from the $62 billion the United States plans to spend in Afghanistan in 2019. Media reported last week that U.S. President Donald Trump might reconsider Prince's proposal as he was dissatisfied with the troops' performance in the crisis-torn country. However, a National Security Council spokesperson told CBS broadcaster on Friday that such a proposition was not under consideration. Last summer, Prince met with White House officials to push his strategy to enlist an army of private contractors overseen by a viceroy to replace U.S. government troops in Afghanistan. Prince said his idea was based on the British East India Company model, a reference to the days of UK colonial rule.
Thank you for reading that, Yada. What's going on in with Eric Prince? It's important for people to understand who Eric Prince is. He's actually the brother of um, the Betsy DeVos, who's in the Trump administration. So there's a direct relationship in between his agenda and who he's related to, as well as who's in the administration of the White House right now. So war is starting to be privatized, for profit. So there's an urgency to keep conflict going, which is what we read the article earlier that basically talked about peace talks between the Taliban and the Afghan government happening. And peace talks means no money for private militaries who want to engage in warfare. So if if Eric Prince wants to get rich or he wants to stay in business, he needs to drive more. He needs the United States to keep the conflicts going around the world. And what's happening now is places like Syria where the war is starting to come to an end, Libya where they're starting to have snap elections for voting. So there's very little conflict going on. Even in Africa, other parts of Africa or Latin America, people are starting to strengthen their ties with the government. You don't see the FARC going to war with the Colombian government anymore. So there's all types of peace negotiations going on around the world, and peace sucks if you're in private military, the business of private military corporations. So Eric Prince is looking to make some money here, and I don't think he's going to get it in Afghanistan. He might get it in the United States because there's been discussions about using private military corporations within U.S. cities that are urbanized and populated by black and brown people.
Really, I didn't know that. So why would they want to do that? Why would they want to put them on the side? Why would they want to put them in urban areas? Hello?
Yeah, I was on mute myself. Sorry about that.
Oh my God, yeah.
If you have places like Chicago that are considered to be out of control because there's 80 people got shot in a weekend and about 13 of them died, then that's considered to be a war zone. And somebody like Eric Prince would milk that greatly and say, well, the local police department can't handle the load. Call us and we'll come and handle that for you. And they'll occupy every corner with with armored vehicles and whatnot, and basically put Chicago on lockdown and have black people held captive in their homes.
Mm.
They would love for something like that to happen.
That's a trip. Now, another thing too, I was looking at the article. It says Prince said his plan would represent a substantial cost reduction from $62 billion the U.S. plans to spend in Afghanistan in 2019. So it definitely does cut costs, right? So it's beneficial to U.S. to do that. So why do you think that it's not feasible, like, as far as happening? Why do you think that?
Well, because if the peace talks go well in Afghanistan with the Taliban and the Afghan government, what value would a private military corporation like Blackwater or Academy, which is their new name, what value would they really serve? I mean, the Afghan government and the Taliban aren't going to tolerate a private military corporation with a bunch of white men running around with guns telling everybody else what to do, and they're not even native to the country itself or indigenous to the country itself. So that's what's driving a lot of the conflict. You have too many outside players, which is the United States and NATO, with their hands in the pie, trying to control people that don't look like them and don't speak the same language as them. That doesn't work too well.
So far as the math on that, this doesn't add up. This doesn't work. So I got you.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how soon do you think, as far as it being implemented in America, in the United States, how soon do you think that could happen?
Probably about 10 years. Probably if Trump stays in office another term, could sign off on that pretty easily. He wouldn't do it now because that would be suicide for for his before his election. But if he gets a second term, he's in it all the way to the end. He'll sign off on it. He'll sign off on it. You have 10 major U.S. cities in the United States that has a population of over 100,000 of black and brown people, especially places like Florida where there's a lot of Haitians and there's a lot of Jamaicans and things like that around there. They'll put their guys down there, and they'll make them a part. I think what would happen is Department of Homeland Security, DHS, would actually subcontract that work to Blackwater and put those guys on the ground. I mean, in Ferguson, there were rumors that actually Blackwater was on the ground. In Ferguson, I know in Boston during the marathon bombing, you had Blackwater right on the ground during the time of the bombing. You saw these guys with these Punisher hats on, and that was Blackwater.
So it has happened. That's deep.
Yeah, they have contracts with the city. They do security detail for large events like the marathon, like the New York Marathon, big events like that have excess of 100,000 bodies persons within the event. They've been there. They're on rooftops. They have what do you call those things? Sky lifts, where they have these vehicles that extend up high into the sky for window cleaning and other construction work. They use those things for surveying the land during the event, looking for alleged threats on the ground. They have their own helicopters. So, it's only a matter of time. If our city in Ferguson and in North Dakota, or I think it was South Dakota, but I think it might have been North Dakota, the Dakota Access Pipeline, they were using Tiger Swan, which is another private military corporation, to suppress the indigenous people, the Native Americans. They had their own dogs, trucks, hardware, all types of military assets to actually suppress the people that were there trying to protest at the pipeline. So it's only a matter of time before they start using that against African Americans and other brown people.
So let me ask you a question, Lionel. I know you're from Chicago. Let's say that 10 years from now that would happen, and knowing the black community there, how would they react to something like that?
Oh, it's not going to be good. There's going to be a lot of protesting, a lot of what's going on. It's not going to be good. A lot of people, there's going to be some deaths. There's no way around it, because if there's deaths of just speculating if someone has a gun, imagine how many more deaths in a crowd of people that are aggressive. There's going to be a lot of, I was fearing for my life, when you have a Kalashnikov across your chest. It's not going to be pretty. And I agree with Mike when he said, it wouldn't. What's what I'm looking for? Strategically, it wouldn't be good for Trump to do it in this term, but next term, if he's next term, yeah, I can see this happening, but it wouldn't be good. And yeah, yeah, it wouldn't be good.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with you on that because just people won't react to that. It wouldn't go out the way it won't go plan. It won't go as what they thought would be planned. I think a lot of people would just fight back, especially in South Florida. I think people would. I think people would just like, especially the guys in the streets. They would just shoot back at them, or if they were to come at them aggressive, they're gonna hit them back. So I don't think that's a smart idea. I think it's going to crush this nation, and it's gonna be a bad image.
Well, if they're talking about it's, feedback, if they're talking about taking control over these neighborhoods and creating eminent domain where they can actually just basically gentrify the whole entire neighborhood. Uh, what are these guys on the ground going to do in Chicago? I mean, yeah, you got a lot of guns and stuff like that, but you're not organized to actually take on in a military outfit like Blackwater or Tiger Swan. These guys have
Yeah.
capabilities that we saw over in the Dakota Access Pipeline protest, where they shut down cell phone signals, where you can't tweet out, you can't do any Facebook Live, you can't do nothing. They were out there drowning people in cold water. There's a lot of heinous things that they were doing out there that hasn't been reported yet in terms of the social media, but some of the reports that have come back on the ground, even Amy Goodman from Democracy Now, they had to put out a warrant for her because she was out there recording all this stuff.
Mm.
And she's a journalist. They went after her. So, um, if Betsy DeVos stays in another term with Trump, and Eric Prince gets his wish, this could very well take place in places like Baltimore, places like Chicago. They'll use that as an example that this is what will happen when you don't play well with the federal government. We'll come after you, and we'll come after everybody else. Probably send a message to all the white nationalists who have all these stockpiles of guns. That well,
Yeah.
we're going to take these guns from you. Well, like Alex Jones says, come and take them, right? Well, that's exactly what's going to happen.
Mm. That's a lot.
Okay. You go ahead, Yada.
Okay. Moscow confirms Taliban's participation in meeting on Afghanistan. Representatives of the Taliban movement will attend the Moscow format of Afghan reconciliation talks scheduled for September 4th. Russian Foreign Ministry Russian Foreign Ministry's second Asian Department Director Zamir Kabulov said Monday. On Monday, Kabulov told Sputnik that Russia expected the Taliban to participate in the upcoming conference. Later in the day, the Wall Street Journal reported citing sources that the Taliban representatives had agreed to participate in this meeting. Afghan ambassador to Russia Abdul Qayyum Kochi told Sputnik that Kabul did not mind the participation of the Taliban in the meeting. Yes, they will come on September 4th. Preparation for the meeting is now underway, Kabulov told the, the newspaper. Russian Foreign Ministry noted that Moscow maintains the contacts with the Taliban only to ensure the safety of Russian citizens in Afghanistan and to encourage this group to join the process of the national reconciliation. In March 2018, Kabulov said that contacts between Moscow and the Taliban had been established several years ago when Russia was seriously concerned about the possibility of terrorist threats to Russian overseas institutions and citizens. The diplomat stressed the importance to clarify the plans of the Taliban leadership towards the Russians, and Moscow received assurances that the Taliban had no hostile intentions towards Russian citizens and institutions. The latest diplomatic efforts on Afghanistan come amid Kabul's bids to reach a lasting ceasefire. On Sunday, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani announced a conditional ceasefire with the Taliban to mark the upcoming Eid al-Adha Muslim holiday. The ceasefire began on Monday and is projected to last until November 19th. The president stressed that the ceasefire would be established only if the radical movement agreed to cease hostilities. However, local media reported earlier on Monday that the Taliban movement kidnapped passengers traveling on 3 buses in Afghanistan's northern Kunduz province, despite the announcements of the ceasefire. In June, the two sides declared a ceasefire time to the Eid al-Fitr holiday. The government then prolonged the duration of the truce. The Taliban, however, did not follow suit. Afghan's government forces have long been fighting Taliban insurgency as well as the Islamic State terrorist group, Daesh outlawed in Russia, with the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces conducting joint counter-terrorist operations across the country.
All right. I forgot what I was going to say. Uh, Taliban meeting on Afghanistan. Mm, I can't put words to it right now.
Well,
I
I
like
can't.
it. Yeah, go ahead.
Um, I talked about this with you before on previous hangouts that and I think we just saw an article that Yada read um earlier that discussed Taliban peace talks coming September 4th. So with Moscow. So we've talked about this on previous hangouts, but I'll reiterate it again that um they're building the embassy for the Taliban inside Russia. And I think, and if I remember correctly, they may be doing one inside Pakistan as well. So what's happening now is the Taliban is actually gaining political power by getting its delegates together, and instead of fighting on the ground, actually taking into the democratic process. So once they gain their seats in power, then it's already game over. The United States will have to leave, and NATO would have to leave, and it'll be solidified. They control 48% of the country right now as we speak. So um, you factor in what 48% of a country is. You take the United States and you take one half from Maine all the way up until to Illinois. That's a good portion of your country gone. So you
Mm.
imagine that's what the Taliban controls. Why should the Taliban or the Afghan government bring the United States to the table for what? What is the United States really bringing to them? The United States hasn't even built anything inside Afghanistan that's beneficial for them. Um, no water treatment facilities have been built. Um, you have all this military presence there, a bunch of blue-eyed soldiers running around like Yosemite Sam with their pistols in the air, going yeehaw everywhere. That doesn't really help anything. You're just making the situation worse. So I think Moscow is playing their cards right by backing the Taliban.
Oh man, that's the way it should be. Get political power, because brute force doesn't work all the time.
Well, you need brute force in order to send a message that because if the Taliban didn't put up a fight, then what would happen is they would get bombed out of existence, and that's not it's not the most optimal thing to do, but it's necessary in order for them to survive physically, to make it to the democratic process.
Hmm.
Especially when the United States is bringing in ISIS from Syria into Afghanistan to put up a fight against the Taliban, and using Al Qaeda against the Taliban as well to try to destabilize them.
So these two groups have different ideologies.
Completely different. Completely different.
Okay. Were you gonna say something, Jack?
Yeah, I think what's very interesting about that is their strategy. I think how they did it was just because they were consistent in their attacks. Um, Again, they were supposed to have they asked for a ceasefire and they said no. So I think that's something that people can learn from. What I took out of that is, if you come with a plan, you're organized and uh, and you have consistency in your plan, you can achieve political power. When I saw that they're going to meet with Russia, I was like, wow, like that's huge because and I think some people need to learn from that. I don't think how far do you think this will go as far as their political power? Like once they receive it, what do you think? How will they utilize it?
It'll give them major recognition on the global stage, right? So now every other country has to recognize you in the same way Fidel Castro took Havana in Cuba. Yeah, there was some turmoil the first few years, but by the 1970s, it was on and popping. People had to recognize him.
Mm,
He was at the United Nations giving speeches. I think every year.
wow.
And Lionel and I talked about this maybe a few weeks ago on another geopolitics hangout. But Afghanistan, the route that would be used to attack um, Moscow, if you're talking about from a Middle East strategy. So if you're funneling, there's 30,000 ISIS fighters left inside Syria. You take 30,000 of those guys and you funnel them into Afghanistan up to the Caucasus, Uzbekistan and the rest of the Caucasus states. That's a problem for Moscow. So Moscow is basically looking at this saying, hey, why don't we get the Taliban on our side and let them and support them in the fight against domestic terrorists on the ground, and win-win for us. We don't have to send our guys in, as well as we get access to Afghanistan resources, and the Taliban gets a seat in parliament as well as control over the country. I can't see how that's not going to work.
Mm. Yeah, I think on the side of Russia, on their part, that was a really smart move. So it's very interesting to see how things are going to play out in the near future with that.
Hmm.
You can go ahead next article. Last one, Yada.
Okay, Moscow to respond to U.S. guided destroyers' entry into Black Sea. A lawmaker. Moscow will respond to the recent entry of U.S. guided missile destroyer USS Carney into the Black Sea. Fant Klitschevich, a member of the Defense Committee of the Upper House of Russian Parliament, said on Monday. A reaction will certainly follow. It will not be spontaneous. It will be within the program of Russia's security control in the Black Sea, Klintevich was quoted as saying by his press service. The lawmaker claimed that, in fact, the destroyer's entry into the Black Sea was an attempt to set Russia on edge. Vain attempts, we have strong nerves, and nobody is going to be on edge. The provocations will not succeed, he added. Mitrovic said the allegations that Russia was threatening anyone seemed absurd because he had a feeling that the United States was going to establish a continuous presence in the Black Sea. The U.S. Navy's Sixth Fleet said in a statement earlier in the day that the United States guided missile destroyer USS Carney had entered the Black Sea for maritime security operations. The Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer USS Carney DDG-64 entered the Black Sea August 12th in order to conduct maritime security operations and enhance capability and interoperability with allies and partners in the region. The ship's operations in the Black Sea are meant to enhance maritime security and stability and combine readiness and naval capability with the Black Sea allies and partners, the statement issued late on Sunday read. CMDR Tyson Young, the commanding officer of Carney, said in the statement that the ship's arrival in the Black Sea showed the United States committed to maintaining security in the region. The destroyer entered the Black Sea for previous time in January when it participated in joint drills with the Ukrainian Navy. In May, a flotilla of warships from standing NATO maritime group II sailed into the Black Sea and what the NATO Naval Command described as part of an ongoing effort to enhance regional stability. The group included Spanish Navy frigate, SPS Victoria, Turkish Navy frigate,
Frigate.
TCG,
It's called a
frigate, frigate Gimlet, German Navy frigate, FGS Bayern, as well as several smaller ships, all led by British guided missile destroyer HMS Duncan.
Go ahead, Lionel.
All right. The only opening to the Black Sea is through Istanbul, correct?
That's correct.
And isn't Turkey and the U.S. at not at odds, but in disagreement about some things? Have some differences.
They are at odds, and the United States in the last few weeks has been taking all their military, their um, their nuclear weapons outside of Turkey. So that means that they're pretty much finished at this point with Turkey.
Okay, so they're not going to continue their presence in the Black Sea because of that, right?
They won't consider their may not send their warships into the Black Sea, but they still have NATO.
Ah,
So
okay.
still have NATO. So that's what NATO is designed for, is that they don't have to actually put their face on everything, but they can control it from behind. Uh, we have to keep in mind that President Putin is inside Austria right now. Um, this week, he's visiting a couple of the other European states, on state visits. Sending a warship inside the Black Sea is a big red flag. Like, they usually send their warships in there for reconnaissance missions, but
Hmm.
in a time of hostility with with Turkey, as well as antagonizing the Russians, um, antagonizing the Syrians, as well as monitoring what goes on inside Libya. There's a whole lot of red flags going up for these countries and saying, hey, what's going on with these guys? What are they doing?
Okay. Any comments on this, Jack?
Yeah, I was reading an article earlier today on the U.S. sanctions that was imposed on Russia. I guess they used some biological weapons in March, so they did some economic sanctions on them. So, do you think that has something to tie in with that? What they're doing out there?
Say that one more time.
Do you think that has something to do with the sanctions that they're imposing on Russia, that U.S. is imposing on Russia as far as economic sanctions? They're trying to get them to
Gouge
get in
them into
line
a
for.
war.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think so?
No, the Russians won't blink at something like that. You have to keep in mind that Sergei Lavrov, which is the foreign minister of Russia, had his plane shadowed by
Yeah.
F-16s. That's a very dangerous game to play with Russia. But even the Russians didn't blink then either. So I think they use those warships inside the Black Sea for reconnaissance missions to see where the mines are, the sea mines, as well as what the timing is on their reactions. Right. So most of their radar systems, and I think Lionel can even co-sign on some of this. They can see you from a far distance. I used to work in the
Mm.
airport when I'm early in my IT career, and I used to be in a radar tower, and I used to see all types of planes coming in, coming out. I can see all the way deep into the city whether or not you were flying a drone. So if you were flying a drone over 500 feet in the air, they knew about it.
Hmm.
There's
I didn't
something
know
else.
that.
What's that, Lionel?
I was telling talking to Jack. I said it's something else, ain't it?
Yeah, it is.
And that was 2009, 2008. They can see all that stuff. So I can only imagine what kind of technology they have now with their radars, where they can spot things going off the ground.
When it comes to relations between U.S. and Russia, what do you guys think uh, the next 5 to 10 years you see between U.S. and Russia relations? Like, what do you see?
They'll restore back. Trump will be the guy to restore relations back with Russia.
Mm,
Now, relations with China, that's a different story. Trump will do whatever he can to bring China to its knees and force them to surrender.
mm. Yeah, I was reading another article regarding to China that I think the Pentagon said that China has plans to I'm not sure. I think it was they had plans to bomb, I guess, certain targets in the U.S. In the near future. I'm like, okay, I'm not sure that's true or not, but they said that they're planning something attack. So I don't know if they're trying to scare the people or if this is legit or official. What's your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that is that every country is looking to take down the United States. It's not just one or two, but China is the main, is a country that has all the most vital interests, right? They don't want to
Yeah.
take the United States down and bring people to its knees, but because that will hurt them economically, right? Because they sell a lot of their goods inside the United States. However, what they do want to do is they want to check the military, check the Navy specifically to keep the Navy from invading their territory because China is very vulnerable from a military standpoint because anything that sends their economy into crashing would cause the people to uprise against the government. And because you have
Okay.
1.2 billion people in there that may go hungry, you know,
Mm,
then it becomes it becomes a problem for the Chinese government. So keeping the United States military further back from where it is, especially with the development of these Spratly Islands,
mm,
these man-made islands on these reefs, and creating a new security zone for themselves as a buffer to keep the United States from coming in. That works for them.
mm. So I can see now why China is so much of a push, and they're forcibly trying to push out new technology to pretty much stay alive because you know that uh, America wants to dominate them, so they're just trying to fight to survive. So it's sounded to me that they're just survivors. They're just trying to just keep pushing to survive and take the lead for their own survival, pretty much, right?
You mean the United States or China?
China.
China is emerging right now.
Yeah.
China is actually emerging. You know, and they have a 250 year plan ahead
Mm.
to dominate the world at this point. So
Okay.
the United States doesn't really have that sort of game plan strategy. You know, they basically use a sledgehammer against everything that they see as a nail.
Okay. Cool. That's deep.
All right. Mike, you said you had a video you want to use for open mic.
Yeah, but I have to find it to my email. You guys, you can guys can.
Say again.
It's in my email. I have to find it, but you guys can actually go freestyle.
We can. I hear you said we can do what?
You can freestyle. It's open mic, right?
Okay. 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 Yeah. Yada. I got a question for you. Since before tonight, your knowledge on geopolitics, was it spotty at best, iffy? Did you have some type of layman understanding? What was it?
Yeah, I have no knowledge at all.
All right. Now, reading these articles, then after the articles, hearing us discuss these articles to put some type of context, to put these articles in some type of context, was that helpful?
Um, I had to reread them because I wasn't really paying attention when I was reading, but I'm learning something.
You say you what?
I'm learning something.
Okay, yeah. I know, excuse me, with me, By me reading the articles, I know I'll read them, and then I'll try to I'll no,
Oh, he had to mute himself. Um, Jack, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Now to add out to what Lionel was saying, me personally, I kind of like had no clue with as far as geopolitics, or just something that caught on BGS and other shows. But uh, after reading the articles, and then I read more articles, it helped me to piece certain things together and see what's really going on out here. So
Yeah.
yeah, this is really effective for me to grow myself, grow my knowledge for geopolitics and current affairs, because I think that for me it's empowering me to make necessary moves for the future. It helps you to see what's really going on, and become more, not just sit in the field on the sideline, but become a player and know how to move. So it's really effective for me.
Yeah, that's dope. Um, I put the YouTube link in the group chat
all right.
to the final
I
piece.
okay. I got it, y'all. Let me open it up. Okay. Russia, CAR, or Central African Republic signed new military cooperation deal. Wow. Central African Republic. Let me bring up the map so people know what a Central African Republic is. It's right there. Let me zoom in a little bit. Zoom out. No, zoom in. The Central African Republic sits right above the Democratic Republic of the Congo, to the east of Cameroon, to the west of South Sudan, and to the south of Chad. And I remember you mentioning a while ago how Russia was moving into Africa as well. Now they're signing a new military cooperation agreement with CAR. Two questions. What does Russia get out of this deal? And what does the Central African Republic get out this deal?
CAR gets security. Russia gets resources
Se-
and control over the largest continent.
Security front. Okay. Strategically, geopolitically not geopolitically, um, geographically speaking, Central African Republic is in the middle of Africa. The capital is Bangui. Um, so CAR gets security from whom?
It gets it from Russia.
No, security and from whom to protect them from whom. So I'm trying to say.
Oh, most African countries are very unstable and vulnerable to terrorist attacks. So the ability for Russia to provide modern hardware to CAR actually makes it easier for the Central African Republic to actually to bolster itself inside the region, because they're landlocked. They're a landlocked country, so they can be attacked from all sides. You know, you remember we were discussing some weeks ago about Rwanda plunging in resources from the DRC as well as Uganda.
Hmm.
You really don't want CAR probably doesn't want something like that to happen to it. So Russia also has a long relationship with the African Republic, going back, I think, into the 70s or something like that. So they help liberate a lot of countries inside Africa from European colonialism.
Okay, now what resources does Russia get? What resources does CAR have that Russia wants?
If I remember correctly, I want to say that they have cobalt, um, but there's a lot of untapped oil resources inside CAR, natural gas as well. That's a region for natural gas. That's how Algeria and Morocco survive off of the resources inside the ground. So if there's if there is cobalt or if there is lithium inside the ground, because that's right next to the DRC, there's a high probability that there's pockets of um, these necessary resources that could actually help um, not just CAR, but the Russians out as well.
I'll have to agree with you with the high probability because it sits right on the edge of the Congo Basin. Southern CAR does. Now you said Algeria and Morocco. Go ahead.
I was going to say that CAR sits in a bad neighborhood. If you look at the map, South Sudan is extremely hostile. There's instability, political instability in the country because they're having a civil war. So there's people flooding in and out of the country looking for refuge. And then you take the DRC into consideration. The political faction inside the DRC can't really stabilize it because everybody's trying to steal resources out of it. And then you look to Cameroon and Chad. There's Boko Haram actually floating in and out of these areas. So if I'm the Central African Republic, I need friends. I don't have any friends.
That's a good deal for them.
Now, I mean, you have the African Union, but that's the political body. But who can I call on if something was to happen? CAR is looking at Syria and they're looking at Iraq and they're looking at especially Syria in particular, and saying, if something happens to me, if I get overrun by terrorists, I need a bigger brother. And Russia has proven that they can take out terrorists and they can actually stabilize an environment.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You said Algeria and Morocco retrieve resources from, that's getting put it a good way, retrieve resources from CAR. Now,
No. I didn't say that. I said Algeria and Morocco survive off of the natural resources in the ground, off of natural gas. That's how they kind of.
Okay.
What I'm saying, they exploited the natural resources in the ground for themselves, and which is why they're such a thriving country. If you look at their country, it's very modernized. It's very a replicate of European countries.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So they are able to exploit the natural resources in their own. And with CAR, it's not able to exploit the natural resources in this country. So they can, hopefully that was part of the deal with Russia to help them exploit the natural resources in their own country. All right. And
keep in mind that Russia also solidified a military deal with Sudan not too long ago to put a naval port inside Sudan's coast.
Wait, hold on. That's not okay. Okay. Sudan's coast is up the Red Sea from Djibouti.
Correct.
I'm imagining that's strategic.
Right, because they tried to get a military base inside Djibouti and they were told no. I suspect that the United States basically told the Djibouti government to tell them to go take a hike, and they found a perfect residence inside Sudan's port, which would help develop their port capabilities for freight shipping and things of that nature, as well as military operations.
And imagine after Djibouti said no, they asked Eritrea, which is the next country over. They may have said no. I'm gonna just guessing this, but we do know they have one with Sudan.
Well, Sudan's actually on the blacklist, right? So, was on the list of countries that the United States was actually going to bomb. If you go back to General Wesley Clark in 2007, when he mentioned the 5 countries that the United States were going to take down, Sudan was actually on the list. Syria, Iraq, Iran, Libya, and then Sudan, and they were going to finish off Iran last. So that's why Sudan is probably Russia's partner because they needed, they were on the hit list and they want that help, and everybody's been watching what Russia has done in Syria, and they're saying, hey, come help us out too.
Okay. Man, these pictures are some bad pictures. I want to get a landscape of or to look. Oh my God, look at this. Beautiful.
What's beautiful?
Am I still sharing the screen?
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, this right here. So, like this stuff right here is absolutely gorgeous. Beautiful Central African Republic landscape. So, I mean, just looking at these pictures, you can imagine what type of resources are in the ground. Just looking at these pictures,
Right. The country has been
largely
un,
untapped.
well, not so much as untapped, but unscathed by war, right? So they don't have to worry about buildings collapsing and things like that. And, like, it doesn't look like Syria, for lack of a better description. It still has been able to preserve its natural integrity, and probably a
Mm,
place I would want to visit in the future for for technology development.
Man, that looks so refreshing right there. Did you want to say something, Jack?
Nah, I'm just soaking up game, but those pictures are beautiful.
Well, I'm still sticking with my countries that I want to visit. I'm not deviating from that.
Which countries are those?
Uganda and Rwanda, they next to each other. So
Hmm.
yeah,
I think they're building a train from Uganda, if I remember correctly. I think the Ugandan government was working with the Chinese. I think we may have covered that as well on one of our early hangouts. That there's a train being built from Uganda and through Rwanda maybe. It might be on the map though. I know it's supposed to go outwards to the to the sea.
all right. Anything else?
I remember on the email chain, Preem was speaking or was
That's right.
discussing about South Africa and
Land reform.
the government taking back lands from white people. I guess 71% of farmland or rural land is owned by whites. 50%, no, 49% is owned. Well, in the urban areas or the downtown areas, I guess, are owned by whites. So they're taking it back, but they want to take it back and give it back to the blacks at a 25-year lease. And I know you said, Mike, that a lot of the farmers are leaving the country and moving to Russia. Some other articles I've seen that they're moving to Australia as well. So why are they leaving?
And these are white farmers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. The reason why they're leaving is because they don't have. If you lose your land, then where else are you gonna go? How are you gonna
Mm.
make your money? They're very good at farming because they've been doing it for over 100 years. So they have the distributions and things like that, um, and have the wherewithal that's been passed down from generation to generation. The the Australians have been welcoming these boers is because they're very useful in terms of agriculture. The Russians have welcomed them in because they need somebody who can develop Crimea, because Crimea is new territory for them politically, but territory that hasn't been actually groomed from an agricultural standpoint. So the boys can actually come in and fix that up for them and bring their wealth with them, right? So it's not like you're bringing in poor refugees who are barefoot and can't speak English. They can actually speak the language and actually have be less dependent upon the system.
Okay.
I would like to see, I would like to see the African Union do the same thing for Haiti, and give them some form of global presence, because Haiti could actually use a lot of those funds that would be, coming from the African Union itself, because Africa has so many other, so much opportunities, economic opportunities available. I saw that the interview with Paul Kagame, and he was talking about putting 2.5% tariff on Chinese goods coming in. That's huge, because they haven't done anything like that before. So that sends a message to China that you can't just come in here and pimp us. We're actually going to get some bread out of you too.
That's
That's
fantastic.
interesting.
Because I heard them speaking about having. This was a while ago. Haiti joined the African Union, but I haven't heard anything else since that.
No, they have not. They haven't. They
They
haven't
have not.
actually. They hasn't actually gone into place. They've
Mm.
become an observer. They can be an observer member like Jamaica is, but they're not an actual member.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I didn't know Jamaica was an observing member of the African Union.
Yeah.
That's good news right there.
Well, there's been strong support within the African Union to actually bring on, um, to get the 80 million African people, or
That's
melanated people inside Brazil,
Mm.
and
I don't
to
know.
give them expats, make them expats into Africa, and
Mm.
actually bring Brazil online to be a part of the African Union. The United States does not like that sort of language. They don't. That really pisses them off,
any language about Black African Americans.
because they're outnumbered. There's more Africans inside South America, inside Latin America, than there are, in the United States. What happens if you're basically surrounded by people who think like communists, right? Africa,
Mm.
relatively speaking, works well with China, because they come from, the same background, politically speaking, as well as culturally speaking. Same thing for Russia. Russia has no problem working with African countries, because they both speak the same political language.
No, I'm saying any language from the African Union about making African Americans being block member.
Yeah, America is considered to be Region 6 of the African Union. It just
Am-
hasn't been. It just
America.
hasn't been. Yeah, America is considered to be Region 6.
So America as in the United States, or the Americas as in the Western
No, United
Hemisphere.
States.
Hey man, you gotta email me some of this information so I can read up on it.
Yeah,
I,
we haven't. Well, the problem is we haven't organized. We
I
haven't
have to
organized
read.
at all, man. We don't know how many African Americans, or what's considered to be an African American, is by number. We only know that we're 20% of the population, or less than 20% of the population, but we haven't organized in that sense. There's nothing saying that we can't do it.
Here, send me some good information that you know of. I'll try to look some up too. But yeah, I have to read up on this. I have to. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's still something that's on the table. My only concern is this: when something happens to Black people in America, Africa doesn't really seem to speak up, or the African Union doesn't really seem to speak up. No, I discussed this before, that these protesters in Charlottesville walking around with saying, you would not replace us, and all this other stuff. With when Trump said that Africa was a shithole, right? What the African Union should have done, is they should have um, put all these white supremacists on the blacklist, and made that announcement and say, we don't want these guys on our continent or in our countries, or nothing like that. Obviously, these
Yep.
guys are never going to travel to South Africa or anything like that. But what we have been seeing recently is that you had these white nationalists traveling to South Africa to try to protect the farmers, to defend their land so that it can't be reclaimed from the South African government.
Hmm.
They have to ban a few people from YouTube from coming into South Africa because they've been organizing. I
Oh,
think
that female.
there's a couple of them. I think that girl Lauren Southern, she's another
Yeah,
one. She got banned.
yeah,
Wow.
her. Hmm. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, so we gotta organize ourselves, man. It's not we shouldn't really put the onus on the African Union. We should put it on ourselves.
I agree with that one right there. You just can't wait. For Mr. Perfect or Mrs. Perfect or Perfect Conda or Wakanda. I'm trying to say
Mhm.
Wakanda to come.
So let
Exactly.
me ask you a question, Mike. So how do we do it? How what's the plan? Like how do one do it? Like how does that make that happen?
We have to work from an economic perspective. We have to look at the fourth industrial revolution as an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to solidify ourselves on a multinational, um, from a multinational standpoint in terms of our businesses. We need our own like Halliburton that actually does business multinationally for the United States government or for other African governments, and say, okay, you know what, Haiti needs um, water filtration systems, solar panels, things of that nature. We need to be the ones that can operate, that can manufacture those goods and deliver it to Haiti and work from a multinational standpoint. That way, we solidify ourselves. Instead of creating embassies, we create distribution standpoints and use those as our embassies.
Mm. So we got to build it from the ground up.
Yeah, and we speak politically. We need our own political affairs committee. The Jews have one. They have the American Israeli Political Affairs Committee, APAC, and they're the strongest committee in the United States that can actually affect change within the White House. Look at what they're doing with Trump. No one ever says, oh, well, that's illegal or anything like that. They're a lobbyist. They're a lobbyist group. They get things done. Look at J Street. J Street is a political affairs committee for Jewish people too. Um, we're not looking at this from a global perspective. We have to operate in these areas politically, economically, as well as militarily speaking too. We don't manufacture our own military hardware.
Uh,
So even if somebody wanted to go to war or it put black people back in slavery, there's nothing that we can do to stop that because we didn't manufacture our own hardware.
Mm. Yeah.
And plus, we could have actually been the ones to broker the deal under Obama to go into Haiti and say, you know what, we this is the time right now for us to put the dispute back on the table with France and get that $25 billion that they owe us as a form of reparations, as a settlement. $25 billion inside Haiti can turn Haiti into one of the most wealthiest countries inside the West, not just in the
yep.
Caribbean.
Yeah, that's true.
You can feed every single. There's 10 million Haitians on it. You can feed every single Haitian with that kind of money, and you can rebuild infrastructure, bridges, ports, airports, libraries, hospitals. All your necessary institutions and utilities can actually be funded by just that alone.
Hmm. I'm gonna call you Mike, the man with solutions, man. He got solutions.
Absolutely.
That's what's up. That's what's up.
Yeah. Any other points before the show closes out?
We check the chat, make sure nobody's I don't see any questions in the chat. Yeah, I think we're good.
All right. Well, thank you for joining this Wednesday's geopolitical chat. Don't forget to come back Friday where we talk about economics. With that said, any other last uh anything to say before we close it out?
Well, I just want to thank you, brothers, especially you, Lionel, for setting this up, man. I'm grateful for the information. We need the knowledge right now. We need this, so I'm thankful.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Quite welcome. I want to thank Yada again. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. So, with that said, catch you all Friday.